Here we go. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
I think
Pleasure
you're
to be here.
please just carry on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate being here. It's wonderful to be here with everybody in this virtual platform as we're all here together. And I want to talk to you today about something that I think is vitally important. And I'm going to start with a question. And the question is this: what will be the difference between those who crumble and those who thrive on the other side of COVID-19? It's an important question for all of us to ask. Now, you can come up with all kinds of great answers. I'm sure you already have. But what I believe is that the difference will be that unified meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for both individuals and for companies. And what we have to do right now is not let COVID-19 define or steal the meaning of who you are, what it is you do, or why you do it. This is vitally important for you to grasp. You have to own your own meaning. Now, in case you don't know who I am, my name is Dov Barron. I'm a best-selling author. I'm an entrepreneur magazine contributor, Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker, and I'm also known as the Dragonist. And when I first entered into the leadership development world about 35 years ago, authoritarian leadership was the way you did leadership. And clearly that no longer works. I wrote a book called Fiercely Loyal that explained that in great detail of how millennials will not tolerate that. One of the reason I'm bringing that up is that one of the things that I pointed out in that book at the beginning of that book was that millennials, and let's remember, millennials are the number one, they're the largest workforce there is right now. Millennials do not want to work for big business. They don't trust big business. Why? Because they were in middle school when their parents were hit by 2008, 2009. Now, just stop for a moment and consider that. They saw their parents who had worked hard for other companies for 10, 15, 20, maybe more years, and then suddenly they were sort of thrown onto the trash heap, and these kids looked and went, guess we can't trust big business. They became incredibly entrepreneurial. At this time, right now, while we're dealing with COVID-19, everybody is suddenly having to behave like a millennial. Isn't that fascinating? These people that we pointed the finger at and that we blamed and said all kinds of nasty things about, and now the ones who actually, we talked about this so often in my work, these are the people who can help us the most. Because what COVID-19 has done, and this is what we all have to grasp, is it has pushed us into the future. Whether we like it or not, it has pushed us into the future. And what I mean by that is this: telemedical, right? Doing medical assessments, doing video conferencing. All these things have been around for a long, long time. We've been using them in my company for more than 10 years. But most companies, particularly larger companies, larger organizations, have resisted that. And now they're facing the difficulty because they've resisted it, and they've got to have agility. So this is what's needed right now: is we need meaning-based leadership that has agility as we move forward. So if we ground it in our meaning and we stay solid to that, we can have agility, because it's not about us doing things a certain way. It's us doing things because this is what matters, and we will find any way. So here's the analogy I want to share with you as you're tuning in right now. And it's to help you discover whether you are actually on purpose, whether you've grounded yourself in your own meaning. So the question I would ask you, I'll use me as the example first. So let's imagine we live in a country where there's some grand authoritarian leadership that tells us what we've got to do. So it comes along and it says, well, Dov, you can no longer speak. I go, oh, I've been speaking 35 years. No, you can't do that anymore. Okay, well, I guess I'll run my podcast. No, you can't do that anymore. I guess I'll write. No, you can't do that anymore. I guess I'll do video conferencing and make videos. No, you can't do that anymore. Oh, can I write my books or articles? No. What can I do? You can, Dov, you can go work at McDonald's and you can flip burgers. That's what you can do. So I want you to imagine that that scenario just happened to you. So you're now going to work at McDonald's and you're going to flip burgers. So here's my question to you. What are you going to do when you get there? You now got to work at McDonald's and you got to flip burgers. What are you going to do when you get there? Now, some people will say, I'll be miserable. And of course, I understand it's probably not your ideal job. And I guess your lifestyle will change. Well, all of these things are real and relevant to us today as we do this, as we record this program right now. All these things are relevant to us. We are all being forced into situations that we don't particularly like, that we wouldn't particularly embrace, that we're not looking forward to. But the question is, what are you going to do now you're here? If you ask me that question, the answer is very simple. If I have to work at McDonald's and I have to flip burgers, I'm going to do what I do now. I'm just going to do it while I'm flipping burgers. So what I'm trying to have you grasp here is that you need to find the meaning of why you're doing what you're doing. Because whatever it is you're faced with, that becomes your touchstone. That becomes your anchor. That becomes the place that you must operate from. So the circumstances and the situations become fairly irrelevant. What becomes most relevant is why I'm doing this, why does it matter, and who can I serve in the process? This is what it's about for each and every single one of us. Now, in order to do that, first of all, we have to know what our meaning is. We call it dragonfire. That's why my moniker is the Dragonist. We find that dragonfire in us. And oftentimes, before all of this, the people who would come work with me, I work with companies and organizations and executive teams, but I also work with high-level leaders from a variety of backgrounds, from sports to entertainment to, of course, corporate. And very often, these are people who have lost that sense of that fire within them, a thing that they knew all along. It was always there, but they don't know where it went. And they're trying to find that now. So they're trying to find that fire within them. And they're saying, okay, well, I've had success. Why has that gone away? And it's because of meaning. The thing that set you on fire initially may have gone, and you need to find it again. You need to find your meaning. So I want to help you with that right now before we go any further. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm going to challenge you to not just be passive and sit back, but to actually participate. You can write by hand. You can put it in the chat box. You can do any of those things. I'm good with any way you want to interact, including with yourself. Because this is not about, I don't do keynote speeches. I do keynote conversations. And although I can't shout out to you live in the audience, we're going to have a conversation here. And the conversation is going to start like this. I want you to imagine that you have passed. Now, you're dead. You're gone. Now, you've probably done a death exercise or something similar before. Now, but this is a little bit different. So what I want you to do is imagine that you're at your own funeral. You're floating around. And I want you to imagine what they are saying at the front in your eulogy. In the eulogy about you. Now, if you've ever been to a funeral, you know as well as I do that when we go to a funeral, it's pretty much a dry cleaners. Like the person doing the eulogy dry cleans the other person, the person who's passed, and only talks about the good things. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about, what would you want them to say? What would you want them to say about you that you feel really good about? Okay? And again, it's dry clean. So don't put anything in that would be if, and, or but. This is just the very best you would want. And I want you to get that, and whether you do it right now or you do it later, that's fine. That's okay. You can work with this. Put that on the side. Now, on the other side, I want you to do this. I want you to consider this. I want you to imagine that you're at the back of the a place where the funeral is being held. Maybe it's a church or a synagogue or a temple or whatever it might be, a room. And I want you to imagine that you're listening to the whispers of people who maybe didn't like you, people who are not going to dry clean. What do you fear they would say? What is it you would hate for them to be saying about you? Now, that's a little harder, but it's really important. When I did this exercise for myself about 15 years ago, it was actually quite difficult for me to do the eulogy because I wanted to put things in there that were, but he worked on this and he did. No, it had to be spotless. And when I got to the whispers, I put all kinds of things down in the whispers, but they didn't really hit. And here's the thing, when you do the whispers, they've got to punch you in the gut. They've got to feel like, oh my goodness, I would hate that. And so for me, when I got to mine, it only worked when I put it into the mouths of my grandchildren. If my grandchildren were sat in the back aisle and they said this thing, then it would be terrible. So I'll give you mine just so you understand and give it as an example. So my eulogy is pretty simple. Dov was a courageous man. He lived his life on purpose to help others to discover the deepest meaning of themselves, to discover their dragon fire so they could breathe fire onto lives and be of service to all. That's it. Pretty simple, clean. Now in the back, in the whispers, what did they say? Well, I came up with all kinds of things, and one of them was Dov was a liar. Dov was a coward, because remember mine starts off with Dov was a courageous man. And those things that came up, they were okay. And they were like, oh yeah, that would not be very good, but it wasn't a punch in the gut. It doesn't work unless it's that. It has to have an emotional impact. But when I put it into the mouths of my grandchildren, that's when it had impact. If anybody else was saying it, my mind could just dismiss it. But if my grandchildren said it, that was powerful. So now what I've got is I've got what's called a pull motivation. A pull motivation is my eulogy. That's who I want to be. And I've got a push motivation is this is who I don't want to be. Human beings are driven by two primary forces, pleasure and pain. Pleasure is who I want to be. Pain is who I don't want to be. You need both in order to find your meaning. When you ground yourself in that meaning, when you find your dragon fire, this is why I'm alive. This is what it is that I'm here to do. This is how it is I can best serve. That's when you're on fire in anything that you're doing. And that's when it won't matter whether you're flipping burgers or you're on a platform or whether you're the CEO of an organization or whether you're working with 25 or 25 million people. If you want to stop hemorrhaging the skills, the talent, the people that you've got working with you, you've got to come to meaning, because that's unifying. It's what brings everybody together. Now, we are in this time where a lot of people are going to disappear. I mean, we know this from the recession, right? There were companies that were around for 100 plus years who disappeared. That's going to happen again. There's no doubt about that. But here's what's interesting. The companies that survived the recession were companies that were meaning driven. We know that. The research is there. In fact, their stock was about 1,200% higher in value. You and I have got to be meaning driven if we're going to bring people together. Now, here's what I want you to grasp about this is, and this is why I come so strongly in meaning. We are right now giving a lot of thanks to people on the front lines, and I applaud that. 7 p.m. every night, I hear all the clanging in the towers around me as people are banging on pots and pans and saying thank you to those nurses and doctors who are putting their lives on the line. And I salute all of them. I'm grateful to all of them. But there are other frontline workers, like the person in the grocery store who you maybe don't think about, or the taxi driver, or the person who picks up your garbage, or the person who stocks the shelves or works at the checkout in the grocery store that you wouldn't even think about. Maybe you don't even give them the time of day. And we need to thank all of those people. And one of the ways we do that is by, of course, saying thank you, but also making eye contact. This is a time for greater levels of humanity, not less. And you as a leader, what I want you to understand is that you as a leader right now are an essential service because you are leading others. And as a leader, there's a pretty good chance you're being asked to do things that are completely outside of your usual realm. You are being a leader and you've got to be strong and you've got to have your head on. To do that, you have to be grounded in the meaning of why you do what you do, and you have to have support. Being a leader does not only mean that you support others, it means that you must be supported. I don't know who your coaches are, who your strategists are, who your consultants and therapists are, but please, I'm begging you, do not cut back on those people for you, because you have to serve. That is your job as a leader, is to serve. And you can't serve if you're depleted. You are an essential service to those that you serve. Because if you've got to step up and do things that were never part of your normal workings as a leader, or you did them but really occasionally, and now every single day you have to manage people in ways you've never even considered. You have to have conversations with them while their children are running around in the background, or maybe why they have a relative who is sick, or maybe why they're feeling in a state of potential crisis. This is very difficult. So, of course, you want your people to highly produce, but they can only do that if they've got their brain working and you've got yours working. So I want to give you a strategy right here, right now, that is going to help you with that for yourself and for those you lead. You may not realize this, but under stress, we regress. That's not you, it's not me, it's humans. Under stress, we regress. We start behaving in ways that are less mature, less emotionally intelligent than we maybe normally are. And the reason for that is because under stress, 27%, think about that number, 27% of the blood flow that goes to the neocortex, to the front part of your brain, is rerouted. It's pulled away. So those executive functions are not getting the blood flow they need. That means that you and I and we are 27% dumber when we're under stress. You can't afford that. You're a leader. You have to keep blood flow to that part of your brain. How do you do that? Let me give you a couple of strategies. Number one, I want you to, first of all, own that you are feeling stressed. You have to label it. You have to name the feeling, whatever's going on. Then name it. Okay, next piece. I've named it now. Okay, write that out by hand. Let all of that come out. Let yourself have emotional vomit on a page. And here's the key. This is psychology. This is neuroscience. When you write by hand, there's something different. The different hemispheres of the brain work in ways that they don't work with typing. So writing by hand in your journal, all that emotional vomit, and you can put it at the top of the page, emotional vomit. That tells you that this is just you letting it out so that it doesn't come out on other people. So you just let it out. Just let it all flow. You just let it all flow onto other people. Okay? Just let all, not onto other people, onto the paper rather than other people. Now, on top of that, what you want to be doing is this. Once you've done that, you've got it all out, then you can look at it and you can say, okay, what can I control and what can't I control? Because there are certain things that you and I cannot control ever. And there are things that you definitely can't control in this particular pandemic situation that we're in. But what causes us anxiety is the desire to control what is uncontrollable. So we take a look at, instead we go, okay, what can I control? This is a time of great uncertainty. And the only way around that is to create certainty in what it is you can do. So that's the next step. So you write out the emotional vomit. Then you look at what can I do? Can I control? What can't I control? You come to a space with that. The next thing you do is you can then start to, of course, strategize the things that you can do. Before you try to put any of those in place, you bring your brain back online again with a very simple breathing technique. Now, this is a very powerful technique. It's used by the Navy SEALs. It's used by high-level thinkers in all kinds of platforms, and we use it with the executives and leaders that we work with. And it's simply this. I'm going to just simply teach it to you, and I know Michael's been teaching you all kinds of wonderful things around how to be grounded and how to stay calm, and that's wonderful. And I want to give you this, and just to allow you to have something simple. And that is, if you can look into the room you're in right now and you look up to where the walls meet the ceiling, you'll see there's a point of focus there. And I just want you to put your eyes to that while keeping your chin level to the floor. So you're just literally looking up at that point. And as you look up at that point, I want you to imagine that you're breathing in for a count of 4. And then you hold for a count of 4. And then you simply breathe out for a count of 4. And then you see if you can just keep no breath for 4. That's called box breathing. Now, the interesting thing about this is not only does it bring the blood flow back to the neocortex, to that front part of the brain, to the executive function, but on top of that, when we have deep diaphragmatic breathing, there's a long nerve that goes from the brain all the way to the gut. It's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a fascinating nerve, and it's the reason that we say we know things in our gut. It's because the information is relayed from the neurons in the gut up the vagus nerve to the brain. When we have deep diaphragmatic breathing, we actually massage the vagus nerve and remove cortisol out of the system, which is the stress hormone, and allows us to come back to high levels of creativity so that we can function better, so that we can lead better, so that we can be more effective. So let's sort of round this up, and then we can come back, and I get happy to do conversational questions and answers with you. So first and foremost, the one unifying monolithic difference between average and great in individuals and in companies is very simple. It's unified meaning. We can only have unified meaning if we've found our own dragon fire. We have to find out what it is that sets us on fire. Now, be clear here. Your dragon fire is not passion. Many of you probably thinking it's, oh, I've got to find my passion. No. Passion is transitory. If you're in your 40s, you likely can't even vaguely remember, or maybe just vaguely remember, what you were passionate about in your 20s. And there's a pretty good chance it's not the same. Passion is transitory. Purpose, dragonfire, is not. It's driven by that towards and that away from motivation. It's driven by this, it's a deeply emotional place that connects you to something that matters and is pulling you forward so that you can make a difference in the world. It's driven by service. Service. How can I serve in the world? Not just express, but serve. And of course, I want you to express too, but to serve. So that's number one. Then on top of that, understanding that you are stressed, it's normal, it's human. Cortisol is being fired off in your brain. And as cortisol is taking blood flow away from that frontal part of your brain, keeping it into the back part of your brain, into the reptilian brain, into the limbic system. As that happens, you move into a fight, flight, freeze mentality. When you do that, all of us, we don't think as well as we do. We don't think as creatively. We're not as forward thinking. We're very much caught in this very narrow tunnel of concepts. So in order to deal with that, you take out a pen and paper by hand, journal, and allow yourself to emotionally vomit onto the paper so that you're not doing that onto the people that you serve. Once you've got that, you do your breathing again, and then you look at, well, what are the strategies around what I can do and what I can't do? Because we come up with that list of what you can do and what you can't do. And what I want to just come to you with here again is to remind you that not only is unified meaning the one monolithic difference between mediocre and greatness in individuals and organizations, you are a leader. You are a leader. You might be a leader of a small company or of a large company. You might be a leader in your community. You might be a leader in your family. But you need to know this. Leadership at its very base is an example. So the question I want to ask you is, when all this is over and you're looking back 5 years into this moment, will you be proud of the way you behaved? Will you know you were at your best, or will you have a bunch of excuses? Leadership is an essential service, and those who serve leaders so that we can stay at the top, they are essential. You need to take care of yourself. Use your coaches, use your strategists, use your consultants, use your therapists, use those people. Don't cut back on those, because they keep you serving the way you want to serve. It's kind of like thinking about doctors who are on the front line and they're serving, but they're not going to work unless we have nurses, unless we have equipment. So this is all part of the same system. Leadership is an essential service, and I want to challenge you to recognize it in yourself by bringing what you can bring from your best, from your meaning. And the only way to do that is to keep all of your brain working together. And one of the keys to doing that is to stay curious, my friend. Stay curious. When your brain wants to shut down, it simply says, there's nothing I can do. No, stay curious. Curiosity puts you in the front of your brain, allows you to be in touch so that you can genuinely serve. When we do this, we can make an enormous difference in the world that we're living in. And we can truly lead through any crisis. Because here's the thing I want you to know. You know this, but maybe your ego, that part of reptilian part of your brain doesn't. And that is, this won't last. As the Buddhists say, this too shall pass. And that's the truth. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. So I'm going to open it up now so that we can throw it out to questions and conversation and see what comes up. I see here in the chat box, as a leader, what would be the best thing to do to support my team if they are fearful? That's a great question. And let me answer that simply by saying this. I want to challenge you to consider that, of course, your people are fearful. They are. And the first thing you can do, the best way thing you can do to support them is tell them the truth. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength. And I'm not talking about blubbering and blowing snot bubbles and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about discernment around vulnerability. What I mean by that is this, is that you tell them, you know what, Susie, Fred, whoever it is, I'm scared too. I am scared. I'm nervous. I'm cautious. I've got a lot of things that I'm juggling, and I love you as my people, as my team, and I believe in you and I'm supporting you. But we're all going through this. And one of the ways that we can do this is we can all own that we are going through it and not put on them some mask and pretend that we're all got our poo in a pile. We don't. That's okay. But we can all come together and we can all support each other. And one of the ways we can do that is to ask about the things that we wouldn't normally ask about. And I heard Cannon talking about that earlier. It's like, ask about people's kids. How are your kids doing? Have you got anybody in your family that you're worried about, or any of those things? Finding out those things, getting to know our people better. This is an amazing opportunity for us to build community and loyalty, because we now have the opportunity like never before to show that we are human. Humanistic leadership is the only way to lead. This has just made it real.
What you're talking about ties to why I wanted this event, right? One of the things we don't control is we're going through something that's going to be a defining moment in our life.
Mm-hmm.
What we do control is what that moment will turn out to be.
Absolutely.
So
couldn't agree more.
To me, that's what this is about. You kind of captured that beautifully. I relate to it in terms of what are we going to do? And what am I going to do, or what are we going to do? So I deal with clients all the time, and some of them, their business, doesn't exist as it used to at all and won't again. And others
Mm.
are thriving and others are okay, but their customers may not be okay, et cetera. We're in a new world. So we don't want to be in the fearful state. We do want to have our brains turned on.
Yes.
I'm glad you gave some technology for that. One thing I learned long, long ago is if you feel like you have power, you see more options. If you feel like you don't have power, you don't see the same options, even though you're in the exact same situation.
And that's exactly because of the limbic system stealing the blood flow from the frontal lobe. That's exactly what it's doing. And so the truth of the matter is, and this sounds sort of woo and metaphysical, but the truth is you live in the world you believe in. You live in the world you believe in. What do I mean by that? Is if you believe this is a terrifying world and it's all going to hell in a handbasket, that's the world you're living in.
Yeah, well, we're trying to live on a balance between knowing what the world is, being grounded in the world, recognizing reality, and making the future reality we want to have.
As leaders, I really want everybody to grasp this. As leaders, this is vitally important. It's important for us we don't need less leadership right now. We need better leadership. And I'm talking about that at a national level, at a corporate level, at a family level. We need better leadership. What does that mean? It means we need higher levels of awareness and lower levels of panic. Let's deal with what's real and be very clear about that, because as you said, Jeff, nothing is going to be the same. Some people's businesses are going to really take off because what they provide is appropriate to right now. But the bottom line, very simply, is the world is never going to be the same. We have been pushed into the future, and that feels pretty disruptive right now. But we've all been talking about disruption for 20 years. We've all been talking about mindful leadership for 20 years. We've all been talking about humanistic leadership for 20 years. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. And if you can't do that, you will disappear. I'm sorry, you will disappear. But if you step into it, if you step into the newness of this and say, okay, this is the new world, I can bitch, moan, complain, and whine about how it's not the way it was, but that's not going to get you anywhere. Or I can become agile. And here's the thing we all need to remember. Those who make the most are those who adapt the fastest. That's it. Adapt fast and serve at a greater level. So how can I serve? Well, that's what I was saying before about flipping the burgers. It's like, this is what I do and this is why I do it. So, okay, everything I liked as a vehicle is gone. What am I going to do? I'm going to stand making these burgers, turn in the fries, and I'm going to talk to the person next to me about exactly what I would talk about if I was on a stage. You have to show up to serve.
Yes, and I also appreciated your make sure you have support so that you can carry on your mission effectively, so that you can be effective.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, don't you find that, Jeff? I mean, that so often the first person thrown under the bus in the economics is the person who is the support system. The doctors can't do it without the nurses. The leaders can't do it without the coaches, the therapists, the consultants. Like, we all need that support. And it's such a trap to think, well, I'll be strong and I don't need it, but I'll give it to others. Then if you're empty, what are you giving? You got to find a way to fill you up. And you can do that through your meditation. You can do that through your breathing. You can do that through your prayer. You can do that through your journaling. You can do that through a million other ways, but you've got to make sure that your emotions and mind are clear. And that's why it's so important, because I do believe genuinely that leadership is an essential service, but every essential service needs support. And therefore your coaches, your therapists, your consultants, your strategists, they are the essential services to leaders.
I love your framing of that. That's a new framing I hadn't heard. Number one, leadership is an essential service. And number two, it needs support. I totally believe it. It makes perfect sense. I've never heard it framed that way, and I thank you for that, because that's creating great clarity.
Thank you.
Let's see. Somebody is, other people are chiming in that they like seeing leadership considered an essential service. Again, the same kind of framing is powerful. I also want to echo your thoughts. Label your feelings, right? Because part of their power comes from being unnamed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is, again, a vital thing, is we got to get things out of the recycling plant in your head, because the same thoughts are just running around. But when you put them on paper, you can see them for what they are. And people go, oh, but if it's on paper, it becomes real. Actually, if you put it on paper, you're right, it does become real and it becomes manageable. But if it's in your head, it's not real. It's nebulous. You can't quite grab a hold of it. You can't do anything with it. Write it down. And I want to give you one more. Can I have time to give one more tool?
Absolutely, go.
Okay, I want to give everybody a tool. This is a tool I use with my clients, whether they're running large organizations or even whether they're athletes. And I want you to use this tool because I really believe it will help you. And that is this. As I said, your reptilian brain, the limbic system, it lives in panic. It narrows the tunnel very quickly into catastrophic thinking. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out that pen and paper again, and I want you to write out worst case scenario. Really, like, and you go, oh my God, I don't want to write. I know. Don't worry, that's only the first half of the exercise. So worst case scenario of this situation, whatever this situation is for you. So, in my clients, it might be a hostile takeover. It might be going in for a championship. It might be a big performance, whatever it is. But like, what's the worst case scenario? And in this case, it's with COVID-19 and business. Okay, great. Once you've written that out in detail, I now want you to take some time. I want you to do that breathing technique that I taught you before, the 4-4-4 box breathing. Then what I want you to do is this. I want you to look at it and say, what's the best case scenario of my worst case scenario? Most people never go to that. You see, the reptilian brain will come up with the worst case scenario, but now I want to do the box breathing to bring my brain back online, to bring my creativity online, for me to get curious and say, well, what's the best case scenario, the worst case scenario? And when you do that, you'll go, oh my God, well, this could happen, that could happen. Things start to pop. And it's very interesting because when I do this with my clients, this is usually a point of leadership agility, business agility. They suddenly go, oh, well, if that happened, well, I wouldn't have that option. So we'd do business this way. Oh, so this is a great tool for anybody who's listening, watching, who wants to be part of this, is take this strategy. Worst case scenario, do the box breathing, and then what is the best case scenario of the worst case scenario? And that will give you creativity, it'll give you curiosity, and it will give you agility in how to serve the people you serve, people you lead better.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I've found even when you're not panicked, if you're filling your head with the problem, you don't have the brain cells to come up with a solution. So it's good to get it out of your head, even in a non-panic situation. In a 27% depleted blood flow situation, it's even more essential.
Absolutely, it is. And somebody just wrote a question. They said, why do the worst case scenario first? Why not go directly to the best case scenario and of the worst case scenario? Because it needs to get out of your head. You have to put it on paper. You go, well, I don't need to go to that. I don't want to focus on the negative. It will remain negative if you leave it in your head. Get it out on paper. This, by the way, this is not a new question. It comes up all the time. And it's because we don't want to look at what we don't want to look at. But here's the thing. You heard me talk about Dragonfire, and I'm the Dragonist, but it's really based on Jungian heroic journey. And Carl Jung said, and then Joseph Campbell said it, which is this: the treasure you want most is hidden in the cave you fear to step into. The cave you fear to step into is, guess what? It's the thing you don't want to face. That's it. So in this case, it's the worst case scenario. So I highly recommend that you do the worst case scenario first. Get it out, then allow the creativity. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that would help. It's anything you put back there, you're giving it power. Anything you don't face, you're giving it power. Anything you let out is already deflated somewhat in power. And now you can look at it in a different headspace, or other people can look at it, or you're open to so many possibilities. I gave a talk a long time ago that talked about flexibility and thinking is superpower, but human beings are bad at it. And the more stress they have, the worse they are at it.
Absolutely. You're so right, Jeff.
A high stakes thing triggers this. So a good trick is to get it out of your head and then get some helpers for whom your problem is not high stakes and they don't have this limitation, and they can see more creativity.
And again, we're back to leaders needing support. Is exactly back to that. Because if you've got somebody on the outside who can look at your situation, and including your worst case scenario, and can have some level of objectivity to it, they are not going to see it the way you see it. They're going to open you up to see things in ways you'd never considered. One of the most common things I hear from my clients when I'm working with them is, oh my God, I can't believe I was so stupid not to see that. And I'm like, oh, let me ask you a very simple question. What? Can a fish describe water? Probably not. They're in it. Can you describe air while breathing it? No, you can describe the lack of it, but you can't describe air. You can't understand what it is you're in. You need somebody who's objective. I can describe water to a fish because I'm not in the water. I don't need the water to breathe. It's the same thing with whatever it is you're dealing with. You have to have support. You have to have those who can be objective about your subjective reality. No one is subjective about their objective reality. Even people like me have been doing this for 35 years and training others in it. I can't do that. I have to have my support system. You have to have your support system. And trying to be smart, trying to be tough, trying to be get through this with resilience will actually, it will handicap you. It will get in the way. It's not going to empower you. Remember, the one monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness is unified meaning, but that unified meaning has to be unified with you first. You have to keep coming back to, why am I doing this? What is this about? That gives you the agility, the flexibility, the curiosity to serve.